When you think about the book of Ruth, you probably think about the loyalty and daring of the title character, Ruth herself. Or perhaps you think about Boaz, who worked overtime to do the right thing by his extended family and even to care for Ruth in following the laws about gleaning the fields. You might even think about what a book that was likely written in the post-exilic period, when the non-Jews of the land were being forcibly and massively discriminated against. What a book like Ruth is saying to that time by positing that King David's great-grandmother was indeed an outsider of the land, a Moabite at that. And how that interacts with the book of Ruth's society and time. You might think about all three of these things, and they're important and rich takes, and I am certain that if I have not yet preached a sermon on those topics, that I at some point in my career will, because they are deeply important issues. But this morning I want to talk about Naomi. Naomi is, in my opinion, perhaps the greatest overlooked figure in the story of Ruth. We often see her sort of as a side figure, one who gets the story going by literally becoming childless and husbandless in one fell swoop, but who for the most part remains on the outside, on the margins. And that's simply not so. Naomi very pointedly both begins and ends the story of Ruth. And she's quite active within it. It's Naomi who, with her family, travels to Moab. It's Naomi who actively tries to persuade Ruth and her sister-in-law Orpah to stay in Moab. And once Ruth decides to go with her, it's Naomi that tells Ruth where to go to glean wheat to feed them the fields of their close kinsman Boaz. Moreover, it is Naomi who concocts the plan that we heard this morning of Ruth to go to a probably slightly at least drunken Boaz in an action that at least implies some intimacy and ask him to claim her and help her make a family. But more importantly, it is Naomi who lies at the emotional heart of this story. Is there a more devastating line in the entire Hebrew Scriptures than when Naomi, whose name means pleasantness, asks her friends to start calling her Mara, which means bitterness, because she feels that life has been bitter and God has been bitter towards her. So just call me bitterness, dear friends. And in return, is there a more joyful line in the Hebrew Scriptures than Naomi, well past the years of childbearing, literally nurses Obed on her breast? Yeah, it's probably meant to be symbolic, but the joy of that moment. Naomi somehow having a son again, claiming Obed as her own. That's joyful. Ruth has borne Naomi a son, the women declare. Not Boaz, not even herself, but Naomi. Naomi is who Obed belongs to. Naomi is the spiritual heart and soul of the book of Ruth. We feel the emotions of the book through her. We suffer and rejoice right along with her and her daughter-in-law Ruth. We remember her, a widow, who would otherwise have been a forgotten one because of this story. This morning as we gather, we are taking a moment to remember others who have been forgotten, and forgotten not just in ancient Israel, but in our own society. And that's those who are struggling with mental illness. I probably don't need to remind you of the many forms of mental illness that ravage so many of our brothers and sisters. We know, at least, all about addictions and bipolar disorder and depression. We know about schizophrenia and anorexia and so many others. Many of us have felt the pain of these directly, either through our own experiences or through watching someone we love go through them and grapple with them and struggle with them. This past summer, we had a class studying mental illness through the eyes of faith. And while I will not recall any details of the conversation here out of privacy, I will tell you that those conversations were eye-opening and deep. Eye-opening not just in their depth, but in the amount of pain and struggle that members of this congregation have faced through their years in their relationships and in their own lives. And yet we don't talk enough about these issues. And I say enough, but we don't talk about them at all, really. And I say we, and I mean we in this church, but I really mean we in the wider church, because we are a part of a symptom of a larger problem in this society, in this country, in this America Christianity. We don't talk about mental illnesses. We don't say enough about the feeling of shame that people sometimes feel. The feeling that something is wrong with them. And note I say the word that they feel. I'm not saying they should feel that way. Quite the contrary. But people do feel that way. We don't talk about that enough, or push back against it enough. We don't talk about the fear. Fear of rejection, fear of not being normal, fear of what mental illness can do to a life. We don't talk about the daily, never ceasing, yet almost imperceptible to the rest of us struggle. The struggle to put one foot in front of another, to make life work, to find ways to live in full, healthy, and powerful ways. We don't talk about this because of our own fear. Because of the fear that we might say the wrong thing. Let me assure you, right in this sermon, that fear was present. Or the fear of grappling with any disease that is chronic. Or maybe of facing our own fear of ourselves or our family's history of mental illness. Sarah Lund, the author we read this summer, talked about her own history of mental illness in her family, and I will tell you she had a father and a brother and a cousin at least who suffered the ravages of mental illness. And she talked about the fear, the very real fear she had, that she might have, in her words, crazy in the blood, because mental illness runs in the family. Those fears are real. And they can keep us from naming our own truths. They can keep us from talking about what we and others desperately need to hear. The message and the hope that we are enough just as we are. That God made us beloved and perfect and beautiful. And that even mental illness doesn't make that not true. We need to hear the promise that God's love is with us even when we can't feel it. That God's love remains. That God's love can't be broken or destroyed. It's there always. And we need to hear the reminder to those of us who don't currently struggle with mental illnesses of one kind or another, that we have roles to play in the healing and the wholeness of our brothers and sisters in our community, in our nation, and around the world. And that's why I wanted to talk about Naomi today. Because I that she has depression. And let me say something real quick. It's extraordinarily dangerous to try and diagnose a mental illness in a character in a story, especially when you know nothing about the history of the people who may or may not even be behind said story. It's dangerous because you don't understand the full context in just 4 chapters, and it's dangerous because you might come across as minimizing the very real struggle of people in the day of now. So I say this with a whole bunch of humility, but I do think there are signs within the story that Naomi, if it doesn't have depression, certainly has a depressive moment, and at the very least, how her life is interacted with in the story of Ruth can give us signs for how we might help those with depression and other mental illness in the here and now. The signs are there, after all. Naomi withdraws herself. She leaves her support systems behind in Moab to go back to Israel and strives desperately to make Orpah and Ruth to stay behind. She has lack of agency and action. Naomi never gleans. She never seems to leave the house. And maybe she does. After all, we only have 4 short chapters. But from what we see, she simply stays put. And only survives because Ruth cares for her. And there's, of course, as I referenced, her name change to bitterness. I don't know if Naomi has depression. Certainly that wasn't a thought in the mind of the writer of the book of Ruth. But I would ask, what does Ruth do that might be instructive for us? As we strive to realize as best we can how to care for those that have mental illness. And there are a few things Ruth does that I think certainly apply. First, Ruth simply remains there. Never underestimate the power, friends, of someone who is struggling with mental illness or disease or grief, of knowing that there is somebody that is with them who is not going to run away, who is going to be there in all the messiness and ugliness of life and will stay put day after day after day. That's powerful. That's what Ruth does. That's something we can do. Ruth also does what she can to care for her and Naomi's needs and never questions when Naomi doesn't seem to be doing things on her own. Now here's where I'm stretching the story a little bit, but I said Naomi never goes to clean, but Ruth never complains. She goes and gets enough food to feed 2 and comes back and probably helps the cook to feed 2. And does the work that she needs to do to make sure Naomi gets the nutrition and stays alive, so Naomi has time to work through her grief and her depression without plotting or pushing or nagging or complaining. Ruth does what she can to survive, to help Naomi survive, trusting Naomi will find her way to some place of healthy and wholeness. And knowing that what she can do best is keep getting that wheat. Some of these things are similar to what the UCC's WISE team has put out. This is the team the UCC has appointed and renamed through the years as the team that works about mental illness and helps to give resources to local churches. And I gave you an insert this morning with 5 things on it we can all do, and I want you to glance at it right now, and I'm going to just list through a couple of them and give more thoughts briefly. They're good. They're powerful. They're easy. Or at least they're simple. Easy is not the right word for them, but they're simple. We can be a friend, just like Ruth. Just like Ruth, we can be there and not run away. We can share our own stories let me tell you, testimonies are powerful. If I didn't know that already, I learned it this summer, hearing the testimonies of people who grappled and struggled, whether Sarah Lund in our book or people around our table, or Randy, who runs the mental health facility here in Fort Dodge, who came and shared with us. Testimonies are powerful. And we can share them in one-on-one conversations, in classes like this summer, in sermons, in words of witness. We can watch our language. We are far too quick in this country, in this society, to call someone crazy because they seem weird, or strange, or maybe even dangerous. And that kind of language, I'm guilty of it sometimes too. I try to watch it, but I'm guilty of it sometimes too. That kind of language does not provide a welcoming, open, or even safe space for those who have real mental illnesses. The vast majority of which, by the way, are never a danger to anybody but themselves. We can be a stigma buster. I loved that one. I wanted to rephrase it. In other words, we can find ways in conversations in social media, in one-on-one conversations, in sharing in churches, in sharing amongst ourselves, in small groups, and in Bible studies, and in sororities, and all the ways that we meet as a people. We can share and say and make clear that we don't see mental illness as anything more than yet another illness to be grappled with and worked on and walked and journeyed together with. We would never say to a person who has diabetes,